Ashley Beatty, an artist from Fort Wayne. We're going to talk today. And Ashley, we are set because I have in front of me a few questions, and this is my students. So this might take a little while to get through all of these, but I think we're good to go for a while.
Wonderful.
They've enjoyed your work. It's currently on exhibit at the Performing Arts Center here in Warsaw, Indiana, at the high school. And a lot of people see the exhibit. It's not just students that come in and walk through the exhibit, but I do have my students go down and write and look at the work, and the photography students and other teachers also do the same thing.
Awesome.
So we're going to just jump into some questions. Maybe just start off just talking a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and kind of walk us through your first connection with art.
Born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. My father was kind of a secret poet. He used to write all the time and encouraged me to sketch and draw. And I used to get really, really frustrated. I remember a horse was the first thing that I could not draw, or I thought I could not draw. And he sat down and we just drew for weeks, months, it felt like, until I finally could draw a horse. And then my mom, she was the craft room queen. Sometimes where we couldn't even open the craft room door. There were just always mountains of supplies. And if I wanted to get creative, I had full permission to go in and find what I needed. So the moment there was actually one of the Scholastic shows in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the art museum there. And I just told the story for the first time to a group of students, and it kind of just brought it all back, and it's been living at the forefront of my mind. But we were supposed to go in and find one piece of artwork by one of the students there and write a one-page paper about it, just a critique and guttural response. And I didn't get very far. I got about 2 steps into the first aisle, and I turned to my left, and on a yellow legal pad piece of paper, there was just a quick gestural drawing of a person. I don't remember anything except for the body curled up in a ball with their hands, like this, and just this pure emotion. And it was just graphite on paper. That's all it was. And I lost it. I started to bawl my eyes out. I related with the emotion, and that's all I needed to relate with. My teacher at the time came up, Mrs. Shepard. She was very concerned about me. She thought I was having a personal breakdown. I said, no, it's the art. The art's making me act like this. And she goes, honey, I hate to break it to you, but you're going to be an artist. She just said, if art can get to you on that level.
We participate in the Scholastics program. It's just been a great opportunity for students to be able to show their work and get sometimes national attention.
My teacher, Mrs. Waldschmidt, she picked out 3 of my pieces, and I was awarded for one of them. And it's one of those things where that program is really amazing for the exposure and the confidence building of our students, for sure.
Who's mentored you either in art history or in art school? I know you went to Cranbrook, you went to the Art Institute of Chicago. Both are in that. They're very stellar programs. So who have been your mentors?
Kim Waldschmidt from Southside High School had actually been more of a mentor than just someone that, really challenged me in a way that was frustrating at the time. Once I went to SAIC, Tim Walker was the technician and wet lab manager for the photography department. And I don't know what happened. He just took me under his wing. I think we connected over music, and then he started to show me the ropes on the technical side of photography. And we still are very close to this day. At Cranbrook, Shanna Marola was a prior student and didn't teach or become a part of staff until the year after I left. But meeting her, she has been someone that to this day I can call on professionally, and we support each other. So those are some big ones. I know there's a lot more. Robert Clark Davis, he's not a mentor, but amazing photographer out of SAI, also educates out of SAIC. He's kind of a legend there. But as far as artists are concerned, my heavy hitters, it's kind of a list, but I'll just throw them out there. Dylan Miner, he is an amazing environmentalist, indigenous rights, activist-based artist. Yame Plensa, Ann Hamilton, Sally Mann, Adam Cahill. He's out of New York City. He and his brother do very interesting documentary films. Isle Wiseman, Travis Hokett, Joseph Stella. He did Tree of My Life. Keith Bird, Roxy Payne, Elliot Erwitt is. I just need that humor.
So the exhibit here at the PAC is a combination of installation photography, and then you have some sculptural pieces. Do you have a specific medium that you favor, or are you kind of across the board?
I still prefer photography, but I have to, I'm in this transition period where sculpture is lending a lot of strength to my work, So I like to always start off thinking about things through my photography. And then I think that they coexist as far as execution are concerned.
Where are you finding your inspiration?
My inspiration for the last ballpark here, because math on the fly, I think it's 6 or 7 years that nature and trees, absolutely without a doubt. It really is about finding inspiration from listening. Listening has been so imperative for me, both to other artists, the actual voices around me, but then also my intuition and instinct. And it leads me to have a frequent amount of side projects that often don't ever reach the surface, but ultimately nature and trees and death. That's a really simplified answer about inspiration, because it certainly goes much, much deeper than that.
One of the things, I spend a lot of time with students working with their studio process. And do you have a specific kind of way that you prefer working? Like, is there a certain time of the day? Do you block off time?
Currently, my favorite time to create is more about the time of the year. So in the warmer months, I like to collect during those warmer months and spend time sort of manifesting different piles and projects and sketching. And then in the winter, when I have to go inside for hibernation, I like to work on executing those larger ideas.
Why is art even important? Why is it important to society?
Loaded. Artists are often the people that are on the fringe of society or soaking in unwanted truths. That informative sort of execution through craft and concept, I think, become integral to the accurate communication within society. I think that art has an ability, if an artist chooses to embrace it, to hold society accountable.
What does it look like for you to research either before or during the artistic process?
My entire body of work, this is the one that I was speaking about prior, that has existed for 6 or 7 years. The work that is up in the exhibit at Warsaw is definitely a moment of culmination of 6 to 7 years of research, right? That's what we're saying. When my dad passed away in 2012, that was the moment that threw me back into forests. Prior to that, I was living in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I was doing work in the desert, but it also felt like the desert. That's in my practice, I didn't feel uninspired, but I wasn't thriving from my work. So when I came back to Fort Wayne, or the Midwest in general, all of a sudden I'm around green, lush things again. I ended up finding multiple things that my dad had left behind, taking them with me to Oxbow Art Residency, where I was able to create a couple of pieces that drew attention to the grieving that I was going through, but then that opened my eyes and completely lifted a veil to the vulnerability of the fallen trees around me. I remember seeing fallen trees and seeing these uprooted, giant wisdom-filled beasts just lying there. And it started to overlap this idea of the wisdom that trees have, the stories and the wisdom that we have, but we have an opportunity to tell those stories and to communicate more freely. And a tree just wasn't getting the honor that it needed. So then take that, manifest say 3-4 years later, I am completely invested into environmental efforts and deforestation, comparing the tree body with the human body. There are about 3 separate themes in my work, but they all revolve around trees, and comparing them to aspects that humans can digest more easily. I don't know how else to say it. Making that making a tree more relative and making them our relatives is ultimately what I'm trying to do. And that's not a new idea. That's been around
Sure.
From indigenous tribes forever. But it's odd that these things pre-exist and then you stumble upon them, and then it's a giant wake-up call after wake-up call after wake-up call. And I've been on that quest now for a long time.
This topic's near and dear to the heart of my family and my wife. She's planted 6 trees in the past month, and I think she's just getting warmed up in our new property that we're at. And her goal is just to keep planting. And when I saw the exhibit in Fort Wayne, I knew this is something we had to bring to Warsaw because it's just such an important topic. Are you a teacher? Are you a prophet? What do you want people to walk away from this with? And who are you talking to? Are you talking to other people that like trees, that are concerned about the climate change? Or are you trying to change the minds of the naysayer?
I'm always trying to change the minds of the naysayer. But I've decided to go about that part in the most subtle way that I can, and officially just go the route of my artwork. But I think that to overlap the previous question with this question, as far as research and concentration around trees, the reason I've continued with it is because information is slow. Information is slow among humans. It doesn't matter how much technology we have in our hands. It's just we don't get the word out fast enough. We have artists that have spent their entire lifetimes working on the same body of work, and sometimes 5-6 generations later, it's just beginning to take effect the way that it was meant to. So perseverance for the greater good is my motivation to continue speaking for and with trees. But we have a long way to go worldwide, but even more so in America. As far as what am I, activist, artist, or something else? I think it's a answer of both with a question mark. There's so much in that question, and there are a lot of opinions about how someone should answer it. But the fact is that I still use paper products. I still have a trash can next to my recycle bin, and I'm not changing myself, or I'm not chaining myself, sorry, to a tree yet. But I know that my practice projects a voice of activism. And I guess the question that is do people consider art an act of activism? It kind of goes back to the viewer and the questioner on that one sometimes, because I think that art can certainly be activist work, but not everyone agrees with that. They need a more on the front line approach. And I think that protest, and I do believe that ultimately my perseverance to me feels like protest, but I think there's multiple ways to do that work.
Do you see yourself continuing in this line of thinking, or are you going to change subjects and go into something completely different in your next body of work? Where are you at with that?
I'm definitely going to stay with this body of work. I've tried to embrace other ideas and other concepts, and it's like a giant magnet. No matter what I'm photographing, I'm always noticing the trees. It's like now this thing is ingrained and I can't walk away. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be coming back to it. And to answer, you asked another question inside of a question. I do work with other artists about sustainable and environmental factors. Sarah Thomas, she's out of Toledo. She works at actually Bowling Green State University. She works with plastics. Shanna Marola, who I mentioned earlier, she is, I don't know where she's working right now. That's a terrible thing to say. I should know. But her work 100% revolves around water, and it began originally with Flint, Michigan, and their water source and everything. But there's, for every environmental corner, there's an artist that I know. There was a an exhibit that Sarah and I curated called Nature Calls, and it was exhibited both at Cranbrook um, 3 years ago now, and then we brought it to Fort Wayne at Bread and Circus Art Gallery, and it went over extremely well. Jeff Schofield, he works with found objects and does on-site installation work based on pollution, um, again, plastics, and a great many other things. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of artists. There's Dan De Los Montrose out of Colorado. I'm forgetting people for no reason other than I'm on the spot. But yeah, I could go on with lists and lists and lists of people.
One of the worst things that can happen with most topics is they can become politicized. And once it becomes political, people pick sides. And when you think of the issue of pollution and environmentalism, if you talk to a Republican, if you use the word stewardship, they understand that word, stewardship. If you use the word environmentalism, it's full of political things, and the idea that maybe companies and people, their freedoms are being taken away. Are you forcing people to use electric cars, right? So it just becomes very divisive, even though we all agree that clean water, fish in the streams are good, and that pollution, debris along the road and in the woods is bad. Like, by and large, we kind of agree with a lot of these things, that typically no one is an anarchist. Like, you think of Lord of the Rings, where they're out just taking trees down, trying to burn down the earth. Like, that's not quite what's going on. One of the things that I tell students is, people like you that take pictures, you're moving beyond, you're transcending beyond the Twitter and the arguments. And when you make art, it transcends the arguments in a way that even if people don't agree with where you're at with climate crisis, they can look at that tree and have a spiritual connection with that, and hopefully they're moved in some positive way. And that's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of music, of storytelling, of creating empathy. Walk us through, have you had any experiences where people have come in, looked at your work, or had some kind of interaction with it and been moved in terms of their worldview?
Absolutely. It's the biggest compliment you can get as an artist also, where the most common reaction I get is, I'll never look at a tree the same again. Yeah. And that's awesome. That's awesome. I have people that have sent me messages and said, I've loved trees for years. I've never had a friend to talk to about it. Would you mind just emailing me can I email you with pictures and want to talk about it? I said, yeah, of course. And then I've had other people that thought, I never thought of it like that. I never thought of the generational responsibility and the impact to my children, because we don't. We haven't raised a society that necessarily instinctively goes there. And I think that education, or lack thereof, is the largest detriment to the conversation that we're having right now.
Have you looked at the research coming out of Purdue dealing with climate change for the Fort Wayne, Warsaw area? My wife has shared it with me, but they've done research and they're making projections of what they feel like in 30, 40 years.
So I haven't seen their published studies, but I actually took, less than 5 years ago, I took an oceanography class because I'd always wanted to. And I think everyone in the world should take an oceanography class, because everybody's like, I don't want to learn about the ocean, or yeah, I love the ocean, it's about dolphins. That's not what the class is about. That's not oceanography. Oceanography starts with literally the inception of the world. I'm just telling this to your viewers, that's where the class starts, is how did the universe begin? And then it shows you the development, of the world, of planet Earth. And then it keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. When you start to really understand how sedimentation in the ocean works and why pollution affects that and why that is then killing off species after species after species, I'm guessing I probably would have a pretty informed idea of what that timeline looks like for them in their studies. But combined with my own studies, I would actually really love now to put those two timelines together and see where we're at. I also would still really like to hear back from my scientist friends at the Smithsonian, who I've been trying to get their current math statistics back for deforestation, because it has not been made public in over 5 years almost, the new numbers. So that's really concerning. And I've been told that my math is cut in half. So
I'm putting you on the spot. What's your best argument that climate change is a hoax? Have you heard any argument that you feel, solar, wind, natural carbon emission from the ocean, have you heard anything that you feel like would give you pause and that you would reevaluate your position?
To be the best and informed individual that you can be, you have to look at both sides. And I have gone down the conspiracy rabbit hole for both sides, surely. I think once you understand the science, it's like undisputable, and I don't really understand. Nothing I've heard pushes against that in a way that. Have you?
My circle of friends, most of them would say we're not in a climate crisis. I was in DC watching an IMAX film, and it showed from satellite Earth, and then it came down and you could see the jungles burning and you could see the pollution. And I'm just like, how can you look at that footage without any other research, just that footage, and say humans can't damage the Earth? How can you look at that footage and you can see from satellite the fires of the jungles and all these different things going on, and say, oh, we're so insignificant to this big planet that we can't affect it? It blows my mind. Now, yes, it's true. Forest fires have always existed, but add to that the things we're doing to it.
I do believe that forest fires are necessary. I think that, yes, the fact that they pre-existed humans is, something that needs to be discussed. You need to understand new growth and how that works. But we have gone overboard, and there are political agendas that have caused, have actually been the cause of some of these forest fires, to make room for developments and things like that. And that's the conversation that is being neglected, that drives me absolutely insane. As for going back to, the naysayers or the people that say that we're not in a crisis, that's because they're not in a crisis. It's not affecting them directly. The people that I respect the most that are on the other side of the fence for myself are the people that say, yes, humans are the number one parasite on the planet. We are the number one problem. We are the number one pollution problem. But if an asteroid's going to hit the Earth as predicted in 800 years, then what are we worried about? If we're going to die anyways, what's the point? Those people I respect, because they have a full knowledge of why they took that stance. If they're just saying we have to die out, so how we live our life should just be how we live our life. But it's also like the argument, I can't help it but go here, is that I probably, more recently than not, I have so many people around me that are like, well, did you know that only 1% of the recycling actually makes it to the recycling plant? Cool. You know what I'm about? I'm all about that 1% getting there. I'm going to be attributing to that 1%. I'm not going to be the other 99%. I don't want to affiliate with that. And if that makes me a positive outlier, then sure. If you can embrace, the negative with the positive and find action, that's what I'm concerned with. Yes, like I said, I still use paper products. I still, but I'm constantly thinking about how to shift my life on the day to day to make sure that I don't use those wasteful products, or that I find a way to make sure they get reused. If that means that I have to haul it from the back of my truck to go to the recycling plant. But, and it's all one conversation. I think people get so daunted and bogged down. I mean, you're as concerned as I am with this topic, that you have to really watch yourself. We can go down into a depression if we allow ourselves. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the things that I like to do to bring me out of that depression pulls me back into the conversation, because I like to go swimming. I like to go fishing. I like to, lay under a tree. And it's like, I'm constantly reminded that nature is our biggest ally when it comes to personal health, both mentally and physically. And if we're destroying it, then I don't really understand how anyone can have an argument. If you can tell me that we only have 1% of our recycling going to the recycling plant, then shouldn't we be raising a fuss? Why are you telling me that? Let's go to action. What are you doing by telling me that? Are you taking stuff in the back of your truck to get it properly, recycled? Are you cutting things in half and washing them out the way that you should? Or are you just telling me because you want to add to the manic panic of it? It's I can't understand pointing things out without having solutions. Part of my solution is making art and transforming my day to day, and I hope that resonates somewhere.
My wife bought us season tickets to the Fort Wayne Philharmonic, and it feels a little like before they play, they warm up, and it feels like so much of making the right action is the tuba player, the violinist, everybody warming up and getting ready, and you can't take that out. They're getting prepared, and then eventually they're able to make good music. And if we say, that sounds like a mess to me, that doesn't sound like music, I don't want to be a part of it. No, like, we got to find our way. Is it recycling? Is it using less things? Is it not buying our food from Mexico and trying to buy locally? And so we make mistakes. It's kind of like the mask thing. Everybody was like, well, it doesn't really work. Well, it's us warming up before the concert. We're trying to figure out what's the best answer. We don't have all the answers. Be patient. But if you say, you know what, I'm not even going to warm up, I'm going to leave the building, you miss being a part of something quite spectacular. And I always try to encourage my students, be humble.
Yeah.
Be humble as we approach these things, because we want to find the right answer. And even the experts don't know everything, but they are experts and they do research. And these musicians, at some point, they're going to put on a darn good show.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be patient as we get into this thing. And I feel like climate change is kind of part of that. So, talking about trees, what's up with the carbon emissions in the tree rings?
A dendrologist and horticulturalist, they both have like multiple tiers of science titles, but those are the two big ones at the Smithsonian who have just told me. The dendrologist said, I'm sorry, but based on what you're asking me, that my math is off almost by half. So originally, based on deforestation, carbon emissions, the oxygen that we would need as humans to breathe, and then also temperature, those things taken into consideration, I wanted to do the math of how many human generations we have left before deforestation became so critical that we would just die off. And it was 12 generations. So now we're looking at about 6 generations. I try to bring that home for people in a way that I go, okay, if you're lucky and you get to live to be 100 years old, you will hopefully have the privilege of seeing 3 to 4 generations. Just to clear that up, generations are measured anywhere from 20 to 40 years. It just depends on a multitude of things in how we measure that. So hopefully you'll see 3 or 4 generations in your lifetime. So if you are visually already going to see 3 or 4 generations, then you're only not going to see 2. And when you say that, all of a sudden it really registers and calculates that really it is only one lifetime away from ours right now.
When we vote,
Mhm.
it's very tempting to vote to look out for ourselves. So if I'm a young person, I vote for college subsidies, and when I'm old, I want Medicare and I want Social Security, right? It's easy to vote. It's possible I will live my life out and not have not have to face the critical nature of what we're dealing with, and you may well also. What gives you an incentive? I'm soon going to be a grandfather. To me, that's a huge incentive. And even if there is no climate crisis and we clean the earth up and it's a cleaner world and we have more species of animals and we have more species of trees and plants, and we were wrong, and it was a big conspiracy, no harm done, right?
Yeah.
It's just a better planet.
Yeah.
But if the climate crisis is real and we can kind of help turn the tide, we've made a better place for their grandchildren. What gives you the incentive to do these things that the dystopian nature of the outcome of what we're talking about is probably not till later? What drives you to even care?
That's a great question. So, generational responsibility is a huge part of my personal and studio practice thinking. I believe that the earth is a birthright. And so, if we start to reform our thinking about what a birthright is, it's something that we are entitled to. Um, if you were born into an entitlement of, millions of dollars, are you going to swindle that millions of dollars away in your lifetime, or are you going to preserve that for, generations to come so that your family is taken care of? We've seen there's evidence that most of the time you're going to take care of your family for generations to come. And why the earth is not viewed from that lens, I don't understand. Um, but what keeps me motivated thinking in that way? I think I'm very, very fortunate to have had parents that were always talking about the future in a way that was their responsibility. Um, my mom called me when I was at SAIC years ago. So this would have been probably around 2004, 2005. And I picked up the phone and she goes, I just wanted to call and say I'm sorry. And I said, why? What are you talking about? I'm not mad at you. What's going on? And she said, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my generation and what we're leaving you. And I said, whoa, what, we need to talk. And I had stepped out of class to take the call because it's your mom and you pick up the phone. And I missed my entire class. I went up to my professor. I said, well, this is the outline of the conversation I just had with my mother. And they said, that was a phone call worth taking. That's something that your generation will never hear. And my mom said it, very much. She said, the baby boomers have left you with too much. We've left you with a wake of confusion and responsibility, and it's not fair. And I think that apology in itself left me changed forever, that I didn't want to have to be someone to make that apology.
We have sent people to the moon. It's amazing what we can do. We have unbelievable power if we turn it in the right direction. And I think about replanting trees, and not just like throwing up a bunch of pine, but really like replanting, finding new ways of transportation, so many things that we can do. What have been some moments of hope for you, whether it's at a local level or at a national level, some steps in the right direction?
I think, speaking from the academic perspective, I think students want to have the conversation. They're not shying away from it. They know it's important. That's been uplifting. I think slowly but surely seeing more and more friends and family try to become self-sustainable in some aspect, whether they learn how to grow their own garden and can, or have chickens. I mean, I live in an urban area and I have friends that live in inner city like Chicago and Detroit, and they have these systems set in place, and those things are super positive. People are trying to think in a more sustainable way. I mean, more and more people that I know are composting and thinking about recycling. And I do think that locally we're far behind, but we're starting to send out more and more information in the mail to people that they can't ignore it. It's like, here's a full pamphlet this week of how you should properly recycle, down very nitpicking, all those questions you've always wanted answered. Here it is. I see more and more of my neighbors, buying indigenous plants, indigenous trees. Please, for the love of all that might be right or wrong in the world, do not buy pear trees and plant them in Indiana or the Midwest. Stop doing that. I could go down the tree rabbit hole really fast. Also, if you are planting trees in a large quantity, do not plant all the same tree. It does not do anything for the tree. Indigenous forests or natural forests have a variety of trees for good reason. And, trying to make man-made forests from a limited selection is not a good thing.
Somebody has a yard and they want native trees. What are some trees that you would recommend?
Oaks are always good. Maples are good. There's, a list of both. Pine trees are not the best. That's not really, we don't have all the weather, and we do have winters, but our winters are also not the best. So, but those are the top two. There's, as far as fruit trees are concerned, we are actually now in a new climate range where you can do cherry blossom trees or cherry trees, and that's okay. Sorry, not cherry trees, but cherry blossoms. Apple trees, obviously. Pears or not pears. Lemon.
The irony of climate change is it's changing the zones.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we couldn't grow before that we can, which is bittersweet, right?
The other thing that really, really helps with this whole conversation, and I know that this is a shout out to Madeline Corbin, another artist that changed my perspective of life. Weeds are a social construct. We actually need weeds. Now, dandelions are a little different. Those are straight up should not be here. They're invasive. They can really mess up your soil and your ecosystem. But stop putting poisons on your grass. Let the natural weeds come through. They provide nutrients for the soil that then provide nutrients for like cloves to grow in your yard that everybody wants to kill off. Then you'll have more rabbits, and when you have more rabbits, you'll have more bird activity. When you have more bird activity, yep. So don't be scared of weeds. It's not a big deal, especially if you have dogs. Like, why do people care about their yard if they have dogs? Dogs are just going to ruin your grass anyways. I don't know. Yeah.
And at least consider low-growing clover something that you don't have to grow, and that can. Yeah, there's so many choices. All you got to do is do a little research.
Figure it out. My favorite is creeping thyme. Yeah, red creeping thyme. It's beautiful. It's low to the ground. It's luscious. It smells good. You can use it for cooking. What do you want, people? It's great. Okay.
Ashley, you and my wife would be great friends because you think so similarly, and this is so where her heart is. Any encouragement you want to give to young artists as they're pursuing, finding their voice, building a portfolio?
The top ones are evolve, educate yourself. Remember, you don't know everything. That goes back to being humble. And you shouldn't know everything. You shouldn't be expected to know everything when you leave the academic or educational gates. Like, you're still learning forever. But portfolios, make sure that you pay attention to your writing. Artwork only goes so far. You have to be able to write and spell check and know your grammar. If you don't have that down, you better have a really, really good friend that doesn't mind being your editor. make sure you stay close to your influences or your mentors, because they're going to be your number one references for your future. Networks are still important, but you have to keep in touch with people. It's as simple as an email or a phone call every once in a while. We are in a new phase as artists. I think we're expected to be at a new level of responsibility, or we will be in the very, very near future. So when it comes to using different materials, we have to start considering what that impact is. And as a photographer that uses digital and wet lab photography, there are eco-friendly options out there that a lot of institutions still aren't using. So getting on board with those chemicals that are not going to harm things is a huge conversation that I'm trying to bring to the table in my little world. But yeah, just be responsible for the things that you use.
Excellent. How can people follow your career? How can they follow your art?
My website is solidashesphoto.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Ashley_Beatty_. I post a lot on Instagram, not so much on Facebook, so don't worry about that at all. And then I also run Bread and Circus Art Gallery, art residency, and storefront. But yeah, those are the big places.
And you're teaching, what classes are you teaching currently?
I am teaching history of photography, photo 2, and foundations for 2D and 3D.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I curate for Purdue Fort Wayne, sorry, just to be clear.
Thank you, Ashley, for your time. And this does not replace people going out and actually seeing your work in an exhibit. I would highly encourage for people, when they find out you're having a show, to slip out and make sure that they see it in person. So thank you for your time, and hopefully we can talk again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don.